I'm here with Mr. Shiv Verma. He's a photographer that's based in Massachusetts, and I have a feeling this interview is going to go. It's going to go really well, and we're going to be all over the place because Shiv has so much to talk about and so much stuff to offer to the photography industry, and has been doing so for several years. It's amazing that we haven't had him on TWiP before, but we're setting the record straight right now. Shiv Verma, welcome to This Week in Photo.
Well, thank you very much, Frederick. It's really a pleasure. And I've been listening to TWiP for years, I should say. I mean, it was back in the days when Scott Bourne started with his broadcasts. And I'm glad to see that despite the fact that your management has changed and people have come and gone, but TWiP still lives on. So that it's really fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for
for a photographic community, this is truly an inspiration and a great thing to have. So
yeah, long time listener. I appreciate that. Yeah, back in the Scott Bourne days, that was a while ago. You know, TWiP we're in the mid 300s now, so it's a show that's taking on a life of its own. And
wonderful, wonderful.
Which is a good thing.
As long as it continues to, that's good.
Yeah, and it's fun to do. I love doing it. So as long as it's fun to do, it's easy to keep going. So Shiv, let's talk about your background a little bit. So so like I said, you're based in Massachusetts, but the fact that you're in Massachusetts right now is a rarity because normally you're all over the world doing crazy things. So yes. Tell me about your history first and how you got started in photography and what made you love it.
Well, it started back in what I would say the teens. I was 13 in a school in India. And one of the things that the school really encouraged was what they called extracurricular activities. So photography happened to be one of them, filmmaking was another, and art, the whole works. My interest really sort of peaked when one day my grandfather sort of came over and said, "I know you like photography, I have something for you." And he hands me, I don't know if you can see it, but a Leica.
Look at that.
And that's really what triggered it off, and it's been just a wonderful journey since. There was, I would say, a lull period around about my 30s when I realized that the stinky darkroom was not a place to be. It just was bothersome. The smells were getting to me, and I said, okay, we'll move to the lab world and start sending everything to the lab. But you kind of lose control. It's not your own. It's not your doing. Somebody else is tweaking the film. So I slowed down a little bit. And back in, I would say, the 1998 time frame, I was doing a big project for Olympus in Melville, New York, and started playing around with a number of their then digital cameras, and it was exciting. It was now back in control. You could do your own things.
Yeah.
So that's really where the digital world took off, and it was 2002, 2003 time frame. I got myself my first Canon 10D.
Yeah.
And it's been a never-ending journey since.
What did you do with the 10D? Do you still have it?
No, actually, the 10D wasn't worth keeping much longer.
Yeah,
I had the 20 after that.
I have two of them, Shiv. They're on my shelf right here. One still works. It's awesome. I just don't use it anymore. And the other one, as I've mentioned on the show before, has been converted to infrared. So
well, sorry for interjecting. Exactly
No.
A similar story. The 30D is what I converted to infrared. LifePixel was, sort of promoting their sort of specials and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent the camera to them, had it converted. Works great, except for a few lenses. And I didn't realize, I just recently bought, about half a year ago, the new 1635 Type 2, the Model 2 Canon, and had it on the 30D, did a ton of infrared. Every one of them has that nice bright spot in the middle. So,
so that was the end Photoshop work in your future.
Well, no, it's basically not recoverable.
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, wow.
But infrared's a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now
So
hoping to.
when you got your Leica, going back to that, hold that thing up again. Let me see that one more time.
Oh, here it
That thing
is. I
is
don't know
just
if
a
you can.
piece of art. Like,
Yes, it is. It still works. It's exceptionally portable,
hmm
and with the exception of the fact that it only goes to 1/500th of a second as far as speed is concerned. But for those days, it did its job, and I don't know if you can see the bottom. You can probably see how well it's been used, and it's got those scar marks on it. And
yeah.
uh, unfortunately, tripods sit on this end, not in the middle.
Oh, I wonder why they
So
did that.
it was a little wobbly, but they've since changed the design, and these cameras have become exceptionally good. But
Yeah.
I want to actually send it back into Leica one of these days and have them professionally service it, because there's a little bit of, I think, fungus developing in the viewfinder. So
Yeah, that could be bad for
yeah,
image
yeah,
quality.
yeah.
What and
So
what were you shooting that with that camera when you first got it as a gift? Of course,
mhm.
you were blown away. Did you gravitate towards a certain kind of photography, portraits, people, landscapes?
A lot of nature-related photography.
hmm
I was into wildlife all my life, and so as far as using this camera is concerned, I didn't have any long lenses back then. The longest lens I had was 100 millimeter, but it was still good enough. I mean, a lot of macro type of work. It wasn't called macro then; it was called close-up photography.
Sure, sure.
But it served its purpose really well, and I enjoyed that. And that's kind of been a continuation since. I mean, I still do a lot of macro work and have macro courses that I teach. Um, we didn't have the ability to stack back then.
hmm
Now there's the thrill of stacking. So things
For the
change.
people that are thinking, what is stacking? Describe that.
It's basically when you have any kind of a macro level of depth of field, which is really minuscule. If your subject has a fair amount of depth and you want to have everything in focus from front to back, you actually take a series of images and then combine them so that you have a high depth of field represented in the eventual image, even though each individual image may still have a very shallow depth of field.
Right, right. So
So it's
the
the power of
resulting
software.
the
Yeah.
resulting final image is more than the sum of its parts in terms of the focus depth. It's almost like HDR, but for focus, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, using that concept, you can even get very high depth of field for landscape photography. So the concept applies even to landscapes, which is exceptional.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Now, when you're doing this, just sort of transitioning into today, when you're out shooting, and I want to get into the kinds of shoots that you do today and the
Mhm.
workshops and all that. But when you're shooting and you're out there, obviously you're not using the Leica anymore. But what are you taking? What's in your kit when you go out on one of your adventures?
I carry two full frame cameras, a 5D Mark III and a 6D. And
Okay.
then for getting a little bit more burst as far as speed is concerned, I have two 7Ds. One is a backup, one is the primary camera. So those are the four bodies that I typically tend to take when I have the car with me. If I'm on the plane, then it's usually the 5D and the 7D based upon where I'm going.
Okay.
And then I'm crazy enough to always carry a GoPro.
Oh.
So
And
that's
a couple of batteries.
and a couple of batteries. That's the biggest problem. And the funny thing about it, I think you mentioned about GoPro in one of your prior interviews, but the fact of the matter is, I wish they had some sort of a opening or a way to plug that GoPro into your cigarette lighter in the car, so that you could have it charge up while you were still shooting. But
Wouldn't that make
one of these
sense?
days, hopefully, they'll do it. But that would
Yeah.
help.
Or while we're brainstorming, wouldn't it be nice if a company like Mophie that makes the juice packs for iPhones and other
Mhm.
portable devices, well, maybe you can do this. And now that I think about it, plug it into your GoPro so that you can charge it or recharge the battery remotely when you're out in the field. That would be really nice.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. Remote is great, but potential for photographing while it's charging,
Mm.
that's what I'm looking
Oh,
for.
you mean like plug it in and have
Plug it in
and
and
tether it? Okay, I get
right,
it.
right.
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of time lapse, and with time lapse, a single battery or even replacing the battery is not something that you want to do because you actually lose registration when you're doing that. So to have something permanently on really would help.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so speaking of that, so I've heard you mention macro and close up. I've heard portraits and people. I've
Mm-hmm.
heard time lapse. I've heard infrared. What
And
is
you
your
heard,
specialty? You're so what does Shiv Verma shoot? Or are you a master of all this stuff?
I'm just going to retract a little bit. What I love to do is to teach photography.
Okay.
So if you teach photography, you better know a lot of different things to be able to sort of, spend your time teaching.
Yeah.
For the past 1 year, I've been concentrating very heavily on time lapse because my book is nearly done.
Mm-hmm.
It's in final edit. I'm hoping that'll be in the iBook store by the end of the year.
Excellent.
So the focus really has been time lapse for the past 12 months.
Okay.
And educationally, it's macro. It's a lot of lighting workshops. It's time lapse workshops, but those are what I call classroom workshops.
Mm-hmm.
The travel workshops are typically landscape and wildlife.
Okay. Okay. And if you abstract the educational piece out of it, and you have a week to spare, and it's just you, and you can go anywhere in the world, what would you be shooting?
I'd be shooting animals
Okay, you'd be
with
photographing
a camera. With a camera.
You don't work for GoDaddy, so
Oh no.
you would be photographing animals. Okay,
Yeah.
very
In
cool.
fact, I joined the World Wildlife Preservation Society when I was 10 years old.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
wow.
So I've been active in that world. So, I mean, wildlife to me is to be preserved in the utmost extent.
I love that. That's a whole nother interview we could get into
Yes.
there. That's amazing. Well, you mentioned a book, so tell me about that. And are you self-publishing this book through the iBooks?
Yes, I am. In fact, the book is Womb to Tomb Time-lapse, and it focuses in on not just the aspects of photography as far as time-lapse is concerned, but it deals very heavily with setting up. People tend to feel that you can do time-lapse. You set your camera up and you shoot away.
Yeah.
You see a lot of time-lapse where all of the elements of composition are actually forgotten because they're pointing it at something moving, and that's what you photograph. But I sincerely believe that both, the aspects of photography have to be maintained with time-lapse. You still have to do your compositional elements. You have to make sure that you have a story that you're telling.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, you then need to know how to post-process. The visual of film versus the visual of time-lapse is no different. Mm-hmm. So you have to maintain the fact that you're going to be showing people things at 24 plus frames a second, 30 frames a second. So your compilation needs to take all of that into consideration. I love these little cameras that can do time-lapse. You just set it into time-lapse and you put it somewhere and it captures it and then generates a video.
Yeah.
It's okay up to a point. But, simple things like how do you control flicker? People forget aspects like when you are shooting time-lapse with your DSLR, your aperture blades are opening and closing all the time. Each one of those opening and closings isn't exactly the same. So the amount of light entering your camera with each exposure varies, and that causes flicker. Let's get real, guys. Is there a way to stop that? Yeah. So it's those things. So the book covers all of that, and then eventually it goes into how do you post-process, how do you take out, and I'm going to give a little plug to this guy out of Germany, Gunther Wegner, who's actually developed a tremendous piece of software. And I don't think I could have, created videos or created time-lapse without that. So it's called LR Time-lapse. That's the product.
LR Time-lapse?
Yeah. Okay. It's LR stands for Lightroom Time-lapse. And it integrates beautifully with Lightroom, particularly now with, Adobe having done the same kind of crazy things that Microsoft did with, switching from Windows 7 to Windows 8, basically made it unusable.
Yes.
Adobe did a very similar thing with Lightroom 4 going to Lightroom 5, where you lost the ability to have presets to generate video. So that's one of the reasons why my book got delayed, is that I had to wait for Gunther to actually build into the software the ability to generate video without Lightroom.
So just describe that feature. So in Lightroom, because I haven't done any time lapse yet. So in Lightroom, does Lightroom treat video the same as it does a still? In other words, can you apply a preset to a still and then, or a series of stills, and then have that series of stills rendered out as a video? And is that the feature that was gone, or describe that piece?
It still will do it in a very rudimentary way.
Okay.
So you cannot really create any high resolution, high performance video. The preset concept that was in Lightroom allowed you to do that. So you could actually use the Lightroom feature functionality with presets to generate HD video.
Got it.
But with 5, that disappeared. So now LR Time-lapse actually does an interim video and then generates the final video for you.
Okay.
And to the extent that you can even do, 4, 6, and 8K now.
Right. And directly out of Lightroom.
Directly out of LR Time-lapse.
Out of LR Time-lapse. Okay.
The intermediate frames are generated using Lightroom.
Got it.
The final
so as an educator that teaches this stuff, and I've been hearing, like I said, I haven't done any time lapse yet. I want to experiment with it. But one of the things that has stopped me from jumping into time lapse is, okay, you spend all this work doing a time lapse, it looks beautiful, and then it's trapped on your screen. So, like, who are you sharing? Like, when people create a time lapse, like, in other words, I see a time lapse, say, in an opening title sequence in a movie, and it looks perfectly awesome there in the context of the overall movie and telling the story. But seeing a time lapse, just, okay, here's 2 minutes of a scene. Okay, that was great, but I probably could have captured that in one scene. So that's me playing devil's advocate. Who's it for?
Well, it's for a number of things. One of the areas that time-lapse is extremely useful is in the process of education. I'm going to use a very cliche type example. If you were to show a bunch of children how a flower goes from bud to bloom, it would take you 2 days.
Yeah, of course.
Compress that into 10 seconds, they get the picture.
Got it.
So it's a great educational vehicle. It's a great educational medium. The other areas that it's very useful for is in the medical profession. It's one of the things that from my commercial work, and I'm just jumping around again.
Sure. Yeah.
I do a lot of commercial photography, particularly in the biomedical industry.
Okay.
Things like one of the most recent projects was photographing catheters. But if you were to actually show a catheter in use, whether it be gastro or it be any other device that is basically implanted into human beings, to be able to educate somebody on how that works is a very long process. It could be hours before you can say, okay, here's where you start, here's where you end. Time-lapse allows you to compress that so that they can assimilate very quickly what's going on. So I find that, and there's from a photography point of view, there's great things, sunrises, sunsets, and all that good stuff. But
even
I think the real value,
seasons, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Series of photos taken of somebody growing from 13 years old to 60 years old would be interesting too. Only I didn't shoot myself.
Yeah. That'd be crazy. Yeah, I love all this stuff. That's one of the cool things about photography, right? Is that there's so many different tangents that are infinitely explorable for us to play with. Yeah. And if you layer on top of that the fact that the techniques and the software and the hardware keeps advancing and changing, every time something changes, everything else before it is now old, and you can try new stuff.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, try new stuff. I mean, time-lapse was always single frame time lapse. Now we're into HDR time lapse.
Right.
So, you're getting a lot more dynamic range, which otherwise would be lost.
Yeah.
So now you do 3 shots for everyone, and then combine those 3 shots, and then combine those individual shots into a time lapse. It's a lot of fun.
That's crazy. When you described that, what was unfolding in my brain was this giant grid of images where, shot number 1, 3 shots, shot number 2, 3 shots, and then combine all those into one, and then compress it into a,
It's
20
pretty
second,
much
30.
that. Yes.
That's crazy. You know what I was thinking? Just brainstorming. A while back, I wanted to do the shot, which I still haven't done, combining all this stuff together. Where, there's this process in Photoshop where I think it was called the median command. They may have moved it around, but essentially it's when you take multiple shots of a scene with images that change, or with portions of the image that change throughout.
And then you
the
get rid
shots.
of what's changed.
And then it removes the deltas. So, and then you end up with, say you're taking a shot of the Golden Gate Bridge, you end up with a frame of the Golden Gate Bridge that is devoid of traffic, which
So
never
how come
happens.
your picture doesn't have any traffic in it?
I was shooting from a low angle. Yeah, but then my thought was, okay, what if you did that technique to end up with a scene that would ordinarily have a bunch of activity in it, or people or cars or whatever. Now it's devoid of that. Then you took it to the next level and did HDR of that scene. So now you have an HDR people-less, car-less scene. Then you took that to the next level and did a time lapse.
Oh, well. But, the first part that you talk about can be done. Because, in fact, if you render 3 shots at 3 different exposures, put them together and concurrently get rid of the people, you have your HDR.
You have your HDR, right there.
So it's very doable, But I'm glad you're thinking this way, because this is what, leads to what I call the advent of new technologies.
Yeah.
And somebody will say, oh, yeah, I heard somebody say this, and why don't we develop?
Yeah.
There comes another app.
Yeah.
So,
My favorite phrase is, wouldn't it be cool if ellipsis, Wouldn't it be cool if you could, and then fill in the blank, and then you try it and fail and try it and succeed, and that's what it's all about in photography, right? It's experimentation.
That's what I love. I love that. That.
Yeah. So how's the process been writing in the iBook, right? And backing up from there, why did you decide to go iBook? Was it for the multimedia aspects of it as opposed to going straight PDF?
It's really the multimedia. It's the interactivity, and I think from ease of composition, you can do it very well. I'm also concurrently using InDesign to do the interactive PDF version, but that is a very, very much more involved process.
Oh yeah.
I found that some of the video, when you embed the video into PDFs, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. Right. So you've got to repeat it and recycle through your images a second time. But I think with the new Mavericks that Apple has just released,
the new operating system,
they have now included the ability to have iBooks on your Mac. Yes. So it's no longer an iPad only product, and I think that just allows for a much larger audience, to be made available to a publisher. So I'm very excited about it. It seems like a no-brainer. That seemed like one of the last straws in terms of using iBooks as a publishing mechanism, because like you were saying before, you were kind of relegated to the iOS devices for viewing content. When many people have these beautiful giant displays in front of them, they could not see your content there. They fixed that with Mavericks. The last sticking point, I think, for this to kind of explode would be cross-platform interoperability. So being able to view an iBook, your book, on a Windows-based machine or an Android tablet. Now the world is yours, right? The day it happens, I'll be singing.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the competitive, we want people to publish on iBooks, and, speaking of Apple, we have our own tools which only run on the Mac. We want people to buy Macs, and therefore yada 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 and all that. But looking at it from a publisher standpoint, say through Shiv's eyes, wouldn't it be great if, you
Oh,
know,
I couldn't
if you
agree
could just
with you
publish to
more.
everyone?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And the fact is, Apple has products that are cross-platform.
Yeah.
QuickTime is cross-platform,
Yeah.
and I think at some point they'll be forced into that because it's not just going to be iPads. They're going to be Android devices. Maybe over time they'll catch up. It'll be a 50-50 ratio. But you've already seen how quickly the Android phones have, become popular.
Yeah.
So can you take that audience away? I don't think so. I think they'll eventually succumb to, making QuickTime available on Android and iBooks available on Android, and that'll be a great thing.
Yeah. Well, Shiv, tell me about your workshops a little bit, and who are they for? Are these beginner workshops? Are they more advanced amateur? And where have you gone in the world, or is there a place that you haven't gone yet? Maybe that's a
Oh,
better way.
well, I started traveling when I was 3 years old, so spent my first 3 years in after the 3 years. My father was in the diplomatic corps. He was in the army, and that sort of opened up the world for us. And I traveled a lot, and I think that travel bug never left me. So, as far as workshops are concerned, I'm concentrating on India, Africa, Iceland, and the rest of the US. That's
And
primarily where it is.
what do those workshops give you when you go out? And how big are they? Are these intimate groups, or is it a crowd of people?
Well, I do two kinds. One are what I call custom workshops.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you and a bunch of your friends want to go to place X.
Mm-hmm.
You would call me and say, well, we're so many, and I have some minimums, and I'll put the whole thing together, and then it can be one of two ways. It becomes an option. Do you want it as a photo tour, or you want it as a workshop? If it's a photo tour, we go places, I show you where it is, you do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a workshop, it's educational, how do you shoot this, come back in the evening, let's download your images, do a review, do a critique, so that the next day, if there's anything that's been a little bit off kilter or not quite right, you can remedy that for the rest of the trip.
Love it.
So that's and a lot gets involved with not just critiquing the images, but also post-processing. How do you maximize wildlife images versus nature? The standard nature stuff versus landscapes. So there are set guidelines, and I don't want to critique your image unless you've shown me how you did it, because maybe you did it wrong. I don't want to say your image doesn't look good if I don't know how you got to that point.
Right.
So we spend a lot of time doing that. As I said, the photo tours are pretty much, do whatever you want.
I love it. And how long have you been doing these tours?
This is now will be my 4th year that I've already started booking.
Wow.
Iceland, I've got 2 tours. The first one is oversubscribed. Fortunately, I have a tour leader who's going to be my co-leader, and that helps. The second one still has room, but it's one of those things where people want to go certain places. It's a fad. So Iceland's a fad these days.
It is.
Africa will always be, a place where photographers want to go. So is India. So some of these workshops become very easy to fill. Some of them become a chore.
Got it.
And if it's a chore, then I decide, is it worth continuing trying to get people attracted to it, or just drop it, and you end up dropping it. I just dropped Panama as one of the workshops because I just didn't have enough interest. And I think part of it's also the cost point of view. The cost per person element comes into play, and some places are far more expensive than others, so one has to take that into consideration.
And speaking of cost, what are we looking at? And I'm sure it varies if it's a photo tour versus a workshop, but for a workshop per se, if you're leading a workshop to somewhere in India, what are we looking at per person?
Well, I use Iceland as an example. I think
Okay.
it'll give you a good frame of reference. Iceland is an 8-day workshop,
Hmm.
and this particular workshop includes all transportation, hotels, and breakfast. And it's $2,900 all inclusive.
Is it so? When you say all transportation, including airfare, all that?
No, not airfare from the US to there or from
Okay.
Europe to
Okay.
there, but
Okay.
in Iceland itself.
Got it.
Um, just to give you an idea, gas in Iceland is about $12 a gallon.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
And renting vehicles, I never like more than 4 people per vehicle. I don't want to crowd anybody.
Hmm.
Um, so, it's all luxury.
Yeah.
Hotels are all top class. We don't do hostels and things like that. It's, the best Westerns of the world. And the guest house that we stay in southern Iceland is luxurious beyond compare. I mean, you're talking about gourmet food and the whole works.
Wow.
So,
Sounds like my kind of workshop.
yeah, and I don't want to, discount anybody else's workshops and things like that, but on average, my workshops typically run 20, 25% or 30% cheaper. I do it for the love of teaching, not as a money-making thing. So
Sure.
it's more oriented towards people who have a real desire to learn and to go places.
I love it. I love it. Well, Shiv, it's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. It's our first time actually interacting voice to voice. But if people want to learn about the workshops, they want to see some of your work, during this interview, we'll have shown some of your images, by the way. But if they want to look at more of your work or sign up for a workshop, what's the best place for them to go?
I think I've, at this point, consolidated everything into www.shivverma.com.
Okay.
And that's the link. I mean, it will point to Facebook, to Google+, to Twitter. But my primary location is shivverma.com.
Excellent. So what's up? What's next for Shiv? I mean, we're at the end of the year. As we record this, it's just after Thanksgiving 2013.
Yep.
What's coming up next for you?
Well, the next one is a workshop to the Bosque del Apache. We're doing Bosque, we're doing White Sands, and we just included, because what I found is when you go to White Sands, it's great during the early morning hours,
Mm-hmm.
and it's absolutely stupendous in the evening.
Mm.
But you have that gap in the middle, and it gets to be a little twiddle your thumb type of gap.
Yeah.
So we've decided this time that we'll do an early morning, the sunrise shoot. And by the way, you need special permission to get into White Sands for that. So we'll do that, and then we'll drive to Carlsbad Caverns. And that's underground. So you don't have to worry about harsh light.
Smart. Look at that.
And so we do Carlsbad Caverns, come back, you do an evening shoot. So we're going to be in White Sands for 2 days, one of which will be Carlsbad.
That sounds
So, yeah, and, hopefully we get some good, fire and ice type photography with the Bosque. And so that's next, and that's the last travel workshop for this year.
wonderful. Well, congratulations on all this stuff. It sounds like you're having a really good time.
Oh, it's a blast.
You're never going to stop learning, as that's the mark of a true educator / photographer, right? It's always a learning
The day you
experience.
stop learning, Frederick, you might
What's
as well
that?
stop. I said the day you stop learning, you might as well just stop, because
That's
it's crazy. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Our brains as humans are too small to absorb everything there is to learn. So it's a never-ending process.
Couldn't
of
agree
learning.
with you more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think if everybody made that a philosophy, I ask myself this question every night before I go to bed. What did I learn today?
Yeah.
And quite honestly, if I can't answer it, I'll get up and go and Google search something.
That's awesome. Or just do it from your phone right there. Come on.
Yeah.
That's
But
great.
you've got to learn. You've got
Well,
to learn.
Shiv, I would love it if you'd come on the show again. It sounds like you have a wealth of knowledge to contribute.
Would love to, Frederick. Thank you for the invitation, and it's really
Oh, yeah.
appreciated. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you'll be a frequent voice on TWiP if you're up for it.
Oh, anytime. As long as I'm not traveling.
Hey, hey, the world has internet access. So
Yes, it does. But
depends on
there
where
are
you are.
places, certain places like Africa don't have internet.
Correct. Yeah. Well,
Sometimes it's even difficult to get power in some of most of the camps we're doing. I'm actually doing a private workshop in Africa, which is also full.
yeah.
And that particular place, everything has power. But you'll get to some locations where tented camps uh, don't have constant power, so you get a few hours, get your stuff charged, and then
And then it's off
carry inverters for your car or the Jeeps, and then
There
plug
you
it
go.
in.
There you go. Then now you just have to worry about gas at that point.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, cool. Well, Shiv, thank you. Enjoy your holidays. The
Thank
rest
you,
of the
Frederick.
holiday season here.
And the very same to you, and Merry Christmas to the TWiP audience, and hope to see you again soon.
Okay. Likewise. Take care, Shiv.
Take care. Thanks. Cheers.